Is Fallout Van Buren canon? On the surface, it seems like it would be an easy no, right? It's a cancelled game, it never released, and Bethesda has never officially stamped it as part of their timeline, so end of discussion, right? Except Fallout canon has never been that simple. Between retcon, soft references, cut content that gets resurrected years later, and now the live-action TV series that's actively shaping the lore, what counts as canon in Fallout is constantly shifting. And recently, thanks to Fallout on Prime, specifically Season 2, Episode 3, a lot of things potentially changed. Let's get into it. In case you don't know what Fallout Van Buren is, before Interplay and Black Isle Studios sold the rights to Bethesda for Fallout, they were already deep into development onto what would have been their Fallout 3. Internally, this project was nicknamed Fallout Van Buren, and unlike a lot of cancelled games, this one wasn't just a concept. It went far enough to have a full map, factions, a couple of endings, and actually a working demo that you can still play to this day. And this was during a time when Interplay was financially collapsing. Even though Fallout itself was still a valuable and beloved IP, development wasn't cancelled because this game was bad necessarily, it was cancelled because the studio itself was falling apart. Fallout Van Buren would eventually share a lot of its DNA with Fallout New Vegas, with similar factions, similar regional politics, and a much heavier focus on the western United States. Factions like the Legion were a huge plot point in the original game, and actually also would involve them with their battle with the NCR over the Hoover Dam. And that's just not a coincidence. When Interplay shut down internal development, many of the developers behind Van Buren went on to form Obsidian Entertainment, the same studio that would later create Fallout New Vegas. And in many ways, New Vegas isn't just inspired by Van Buren, it's Van Buren reborn. Now, the main plot of Van Buren, which involves the player stopping the Enclave from essentially ending the world by using interdimensional space travel, isn't something I'm going to fully break down in this video because, honestly, the story deserves its own video. And if that sounds even remotely insane or interesting to you, I'm currently working on a full documentary covering the entire Fallout Van Buren storyline from start to finish, everything we know about it. So if that interests you, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of that. But for today, the story of Van Buren isn't the important part. What matters is its world and locations. Officially, Fallout Van Buren has always existed in a weird limbo. It's not canon in the traditional sense. Bethesda never released it, never confirmed it, and for the years it lived purely in the design documents. But Fallout has a long history of quietly pulling ideas from cancelled or cut content, reintroducing them later, sometimes decades after the fact, things like factions and main characters from Fallout Van Buren into Vegas, and vault experiments and ideas from the original Fallout Bible. In Season 2, Episode 3 of Fallout on Prime, there's a scene where Elder Cleric Qunitus and other Brotherhood elders are discussing what to do about Paladin Harkness and the East Coast Brotherhood of Steel. At first glance, this seems like a normal expedition scene, but if you look closely, really closely, there's a map behind Qunitus. It's blurry and it's particularly obscured, and absolutely not meant to be paused and analyzed frame by frame, which is of course what us Fallout fans immediately did exactly after seeing it. Thanks to the work of Nukapedia editor Zolo, among with several incredibly dedicated Redditors, that background prop was cleaned up, enhanced, and compared against known Fallout maps, and that's when things got interesting. Because once you reconstruct the map, it doesn't just show modern Fallout locations. It includes places from Fallout 1, Fallout New Vegas, and locations that only ever existed in Fallout Van Buren. These cancelled Van Buren locations include places like the Blackfoot Village, the Bloomsfield Space Center, the Maxon Bunker, Moletown, Tibbetts Prison, and several others that until now only existed inside design documents and developer notes. These aren't just Easter eggs, they aren't fake references. These are named locations placed deliberately on a faction map in the official Fallout production. And out of everything listed on that map, there are 5 locations in particular that I want to dive into and what they exactly mean. Those locations include the Scrap Heap, the Circle of Steel Hideout, the Big MT and the Divide, which I'm going to be grouping together, and finally, Siri Town. Scrap Heap is one of those Fallout locations that almost no one talks about, and for a long time that was because people didn't even really think it counted. Scrap Heap only appeared in the original demo for the original Fallout game, not in the full release, and for decades, that fact kept it in a weird limbo. The demo takes place in the year 2161, the same year as the original, but the town itself never appears in the final game, and this wasn't unusual at the time. In the late 90s, developers often used demos as a way to show off the tone, mechanics, and world building without worrying so much about long-term canon, lore, or building out an entire world. Entire towns would be created solely to give players a vertical slice of the world. In fact, funny enough, Scrap Heap would eventually be reused to create Junktown in the original game. Scrap Heap is a small settlement located somewhere in New California, with its inhabitants directly mentioning Junktown and Necropolis, which places it relatively close to both. The town itself is exactly what you expect in an early Fallout game, a rough, desperate settlement surrounded by walls made entirely of wrecked cars, welded together to make a makeshift fortress or wall. Control of Scrap Heap is contested by 2 rival gangs, the Crips and the Fools. Neither group is particularly heroic, and neither is meant to be. They represent 2 different kinds of post-war survival, opportunism versus chaos, and the player is forced to choose which one takes control of the settlement. So why am I spending so much time talking about this tiny town from a demo that most players have never touched nor heard of? Because for the longest time, Scrap Heap wasn't considered canon at all. It never appeared in Fallout 2, it's never mentioned in later games, and for years, the general assumption was that Scrap Heap wasn't a real place in the Fallout universe. It's just a demo exclusive location meant to show off the setting and nothing more. That assumption held true for decades until the Fallout Prime series, because when the Brotherhood map appears behind Elder Cleric Qunitus, Scrap Heap is listed right there alongside established fully canon location. That one background prop quietly does something massive. It canonizes Scrap Heap, and once Scrap Heap becomes canon, that implications start racking up. If the town exists, then its internal conflict most likely exists too. That means the Crips and the Fools, 2 factions that were never meant to matter beyond the demo, may now be a part of Fallout history. And then there's Max Stone, the player character from the Fallout demo, the person who ultimately decides which gang controls the settlement. Since the demo takes place in 2161, the same year as the original Fallout, that raises the simple but fascinating question: if Scrap Heap is canon now, what choices were made there? Of course, that doesn't mean we're ever going to see Scrap Heap again, or that Bethesda is secretly planning a game to be set there. But it does mean that Fallout's past is being quietly rewritten to include places that were never meant to survive beyond early development. In the grand scheme of Fallout, Scrap Heap is a tiny dot on the map, a small forgotten town that most players will never visit, nor will you really remember it besides this video. But its sudden possible canonization is interesting not because of what the Scrap Heap is, but because of what it represents. Proof that even the most obscure corners of Fallout's development history can be pulled back into the spotlight decades later. Sitting right next to Maxon's bunker on the Brotherhood map is the Circle of Steel hideout, and unlike some of the other locations we've talked about, this one is immediately readable. There's no squinting, no enhancing, no debate, it's just there. For fans of the Fallout lore, and especially longtime viewers of this channel, the Circle of Steel needs no introduction. But for everyone else, the Circle of Steel is a secret internal branch of the Brotherhood of Steel tasked with handling problems the Brotherhood doesn't want to openly discuss. It's like internal affairs. They don't fight supermutants, they don't secure ruins, they don't deal with technology. They deal with other members of the Brotherhood. We hear about the Circle of Steel more clearly in Fallout New Vegas, specifically through the Dead Money DLC. Christine Royce, one of the central characters in that story, is a confirmed member of the Circle, and her original mission wasn't to explore or recovery, she was directly sent to assassinate Elder Elijah. That tells us everything we need to know about how extreme this organization is willing to be. What a lot of people don't realize is that the Circle of Steel didn't originate in New Vegas. They originally were created to appear in Fallout Van Buren, where they were written to be far more active and far more dangerous. The presence within the Brotherhood, according to Chris Avallone, the Circle of Steel was envisioned to kind of internal Black Ops division that was slowly becoming unhinged, in part due to the extreme prolonged use of stealth boy technology, which is later seen in Fallout New Vegas in the Super Mutant faction. The Circle of Steel believes that the Brotherhood has drifted away from its original purpose, the preservation and control of advanced technology. In their eyes, the Brotherhood wasn't just failing, it was portraying its founding principles, and from their perspective, they were the only ones still doing their job correctly. Here's why that matters so much. Until now, the Circle of Steel has always existed in the shadows, whispered about, implied, rarely seen, and never officially headquartered anywhere. But this map changes that. The fact that the Circle of Steel hideout is marked directly next to Maxon's bunker raises some massive questions. Does the Circle of Steel have an entire chapter operating independently in this region? Is Maxon's bunker itself tied to the Circle, or even under their control? Or is this a hideout or surveillance post placed here so they have a more regionalized section to listen in? And here's the part that really changes things. This map being displayed by the Brotherhood of Steel themselves, which means the Circle of Steel isn't just a rumor or conspiracy anymore. They're acknowledged, they're cataloged, and more important enough to be included in the official Brotherhood intelligence map. The Big MT and the Divide. Now, Big MT and the Divide are names that Fallout New Vegas players instantly recognize. They're the settings for two of the game's most important DLCs, Old World Blues and the Losum Road. But for all the time we spent at those places, one thing has always been deliberately unclear: where exactly they are in respect to the rest of the game. And that wasn't by accident. According to Joshua Sawyer, the project director for Fallout New Vegas, the exact locations of the Big MT and the Divide were intentionally left vague. They were meant to feel isolated, disconnected, places you won't just stumble onto on the map. They exist on the edges of the Mojave both physically and narratively. That ambiguity helped preserve the tone of each DLC. The Big MT feels like it's sealed off, science experiment gone wrong, off the rails, while the Divide feels like a wound in the world, something broken, dangerous, and barely understood. Until now, they were just distant, they were unplaceable. That's why the Brotherhood map shown on the Prime show is such a big deal. For the first time, we're just not guesstimating. We're not trying to triangulate the location based on dialogue or some mountains in the background. We're being shown where they are on the map directly. According to the map, Big MT is located west of Jacobstown and Red Rock Canyon. That placement is fascinating because it puts the Big MT squarely in the same general region as known Super Mutant and the Great Khan territory, factions that canonically have no idea what's happening just beyond their borders. Entire tribes living their lives while one of the most dangerous pre-war research facilities in the world just sits over the horizon. The map also places Ashton and Hopeville, two major components of the Divide, to the northwest of the Big MT. This finally gives us a geographic relationship between the two DLCs that would have never been seen before. And that matters because it reinforces the idea that these locations weren't isolated accidents, they were part of the same broader pre-war infrastructure network. Both the Big MT and the Divide trace their conceptual roots back to Fallout Van Buren. The obsession with experimental technology, and the consequences of unchecked silence, and the idea of wasteland being shaped by the directions made decades earlier. All of that was central to Van Buren's design philosophy. On the surface, this might feel like a small detail, just a map confirming some coordinates, but in Fallout, location is lore. Where something exists determines who could have known about it, who might have been affected by it, and who might still be dealing with the fallout, literally. And finally, we come to Siri Town, the location that doesn't just add information, it exposes the entire illusion. Because unlike every other place on this map, Siri Town has never appeared in any Fallout game. Siri Town isn't mentioned in the original Fallout, not in Fallout 2, not in Fallout New Vegas, not in the Fallout Bible, and it's not even in a canceled project like Fallout Van Buren. In fact, Siri Town doesn't exist in the official Fallout lore really at all, because Siri Town is actually a placeholder name originating from a fan-made Fallout map created by DeviantArt user PLKMP1830, also known as Polkp on Reddit, which tells us something huge. The Brotherhood map shown on this episode wasn't entirely built from Bethesda reference material. It was based, at least in part, of a fan-made map pulled from the internet. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean the idea of the location is fake. The settlement itself is kind of real, or at least it exists kind of in the Fallout lore. Siri is an enslaved woman encountered in Fallout New Vegas. During her dialogue, she mentions that her home settlement was located somewhere in New Mexico and was burnt to the ground by Caesar's Legion. However, the settlement is never named. Because that location never had an official name, the original creator of the map labeled it just as Siri Town, as a placeholder when constructing the fan-made map, not as canon, but as a visual representation of an unnamed tragedy in the Fallout world. And that placeholder name made its way into a major canon Fallout production. This single detail confirms that the Brotherhood map in the Prime show is heavily based on this fan-made map. There's really no other explanation, and interestingly, while most locations were carried over, the show's version isn't a direct one-to-one copy. Some locations like Vault 24 and Shady Sands are missing entirely from this map. Other locations have been shifted slightly from its original placement, suggesting the prop designers adjusted this map to better fit the show's narrative or to scale it up. But there's one difference that matters more than all the others, but we'll get into that in 1 minute. So with that brings us to the final question. Does this map make these locations canon? And to that, my answer is yes, with a question mark, right? Fallout on Prime has been confirmed multiple times now to be fully canon within the Fallout universe. Fallout 5 will be directly affected by the events that happen in the show. This isn't a parallel timeline, it's the same continuity. And because of that, the locations shown on the map likely fall into what I like to call a semi-canon category, similar to that of Fallout Tactics. Bethesda can choose which elements they want to fully embrace and which quietly to just fade into the background. I think we now have a very strong case, at least in the locations from the canceled Fallout 3 codename Fallout Van Buren, that can be made to say that it is in some way, shape, or form canonized, at least in its name and placement of these locations. And that alone is insane to think about. Because there is one major issue, a small detail with huge implications, and that is the Mississippi River. On the map shown in the series, the Mississippi appears on the far eastern edge, but if this map were drawn to scale, the Mississippi shouldn't even be on this map at all. Even more interesting, this river wasn't represented in the original fan-made map. It was added specifically for this show. So, does this mean the map is stretched eastward? Does it mean that the entire fan map was kind of just shifted locations? Or does this mean this map was never meant to be geographically accurate in the first place? Instead of giving us answers, that single river raises even more questions. Personally, I love the original Fallout games and the lore that came out of that era. Some of the best writing and world building in the series live there, and that's how I personally fell in love with Fallout in the first place. So I'm perfectly okay with this becoming canon, but I also understand why that's up for debate. Massive shout out to everyone who worked to decode this map frame by frame. Huge credit to Zolo at Nukipedia, and an equally massive thanks to the original creator for this map. This is absolutely amazing. And the map itself just looks amazing by itself. And the idea that it is essentially canonized is such a weird thing and is a huge credit to what you do, especially if that means they thought like this was an official Bethesda thing. So with that, what do you think? Does this make these locations canon, at least in name only? Or is this just an incredible coincidence born from a background prop that was just a mistake? Let me know your thoughts in the comment sections down below. If you're into Fallout lore, deep dives like this, consider subscribing. I got a massive lineup of Fallout content planned for this year, and trust me, you're not ready, and you're going to want to stick around. But until then, this has been Nick from Nostalgic, signing off.